The sound went a bit wonky my end, but anyway, we're here. We're back, back with the beautiful Jennifer for another. Well, we haven't. In fact, we haven't actually called our lives anything, have we?
No, I guess we haven't. We need to come up with a name.
We do need to come up with a name because I was on my end. It's just called Raw Fed Feline Live, but we need to think about a name.
We need a name. Yes, we'll have to brainstorm.
Yeah, we will. So we'll welcome back everyone. Let me get the chat up. So if you are here, drop a comment and let us know. Let us know if you can hear us okay. And there we go. And you can see us okay. So Jennifer and I are back for another monthly talk about feeding raw to your cat. And tonight we are talking about transitioning. So because this is only our second one. Hi, Heather. Jennifer, do you want to just introduce yourself to everybody so they know like who you are and why you're with me tonight talking about raw food?
Sure. So hello, everybody from wherever you may be. My name is Jennifer, and me along with my Tortie Hazel, we make up the Raw Fed Feline, and I'm a feline nutrition consultant, and I'm love talking about feline nutrition and want to definitely looking forward to tackling this topic because transitioning is tough with cats sometimes.
Yes. So Jennifer and I have come together to brainstorm on topics that we can support you all with. And last time we talked about the different types of raw food. You can catch that on the Naturally Cats YouTube channel if you want to watch the replay. We are hopeful that next month we will also be live on Instagram as well, so we'll be able to save our lives there too. Hi, Cherry. So yes, as Jennifer said, tonight we're talking about transitioning, and this is a topic that I think people think goes a certain way, but actually, like, there are so many different variations as to how that journey can unfold. And we were both talking before we came live to make sure that we had an overview of what we wanted to talk to you all about. And we came up with 3 key points that we're going to talk about tonight. And they're 3 Ps. Okay. So it's pace, perspective, and patience. Okay. So if you do, I will put that in a chat in a minute when Jennifer starts giving us some info. So pace, perspective, and patience. So kick us off, Jennifer. Tell us, start with one of the P's, whichever one you think is the best place to start. And I will drop it in the comments for everyone.
Okay. I think perspective actually is going to be the first place we want to start, because we certainly, as the cat parent, have a perspective. Oftentimes we've gathered some new information. We've learned something new about feline nutrition or what we're feeding our cats. And oftentimes we can be very excited to improve their diet. And so our perspective is, I'm doing this really wonderful thing for you, my beloved cat, because I do love you so much. And the cat's perspective is like, yeah, nobody asked me, and I'm good with what I got going on here. So I don't know why we have to do this. So I think it's really important to kind of hold in mind how cats learn what is food. And really that's their mama cat's teaching them. Once they're weaned from her milk, mama cat brings them food and says, this is it. This is what food looks like. And there is this kind of developmental window of time for kittens of this is when they're learning about what food is. And what they're not exposed to during that time, that falls into the category of not food. So, by the time we adopt our cats, whether they're 10, 12, 14 weeks old, or whether we're adopting an adult cat, they've already have this idea, kind of like an imprint of what food is. And so when we come along and are like, hey, I want you to eat something different, they're like, yeah, that's actually not food. I don't recognize
what
this.
What are you doing to me, human?
Right? Like, why is this happening? Because it's really become suspect for them. Like this, it's potentially not safe, right? It's a way that cats keep themselves safe in the wild. I eat what I know is familiar and safe. And if we think about like how different dry food is from wet food, like in a tin, or from home cooked food, or raw, the various different kind of textures and ways raw food can look, they don't look anything like dry food. They don't smell the same, look the same. It's really foreign. And I think we have to kind of hold that in mind, that that's our cat's starting point.
And it becomes a stressor, right? So if you're trying to introduce something new, like you said, like with a cat is, no one asked me about this, they don't know that for their good, for their benefit, So
Yeah.
when they're not exposed to something, we've got to look at how we do the desensitization, how we support them
Mhm.
with that. Because like you said, that imprint, I think that's a really great word. It's like with children when
Mhm.
they are, when you're weaning them, you're meant to bring in loads of different flavors and tastes and
Mhm.
stuff so that you can expose them to,
Yes.
like you said, prove that it's safe and it's okay, and particularly for cats being predator or prey, that it's not a threat. It's
Yeah.
not a threat. Like their basic need over everything else is survival. So if
Mhm.
something is a threat to them, they will not play ball.
Yeah, yeah, they will not at all, and I think that's to me, that's often a big difference between cats and dogs. A lot of times, when people are transitioning dogs, they're like, I skipped a meal, made sure they were extra hungry, gave them some food, and they ate it." It's like, or I waited them out, and then my dog eventually ate
Mm.
it, and, this is a really key difference between dogs and cats because your cat will wait you out way more before you, and that can, become unsafe for them actually,
Yeah, that's
if
to
they
their to
don't.
their own detriment, isn't it? They will make themselves
Mhm.
sick. It's not a
Yeah,
question of like with children and with dogs, they'll eat when they're hungry. That's
right.
not the way it works. That is
No,
not the way at all.
right, you cannot tough love a kitty into eating new food,
No, no.
and I think it becomes incredibly confusing then, right? And just in
Mm,
terms of the relationship between you and your cat, because your cat
mm,
is saying like, "This is not working for me, this doesn't feel safe," and now you're, like, not feeding me, and you're giving me this other stuff, and I don't understand what's happening, and there can become so much, I think, confusion and just, mm, like, basic misunderstanding then between the cat parent and the cat, like, nobody's on the same
mm,
page together
mm,
and working against each other, and then
mm,
that can snowball, and I think that's where maybe our second P comes in of patience, right? Of you're gonna have to be really patient when you're introducing something
mm.
new, because cats are really different. There are some cats who will accept a new food in a couple days, and other cats that will need 3, 6, 9, 12 months. I mean, it can take a long time,
Mm,
and that's really individual based on the cat.
mm.
Um, and I think sometimes it can take longer maybe than it might otherwise if the cat parent doesn't quite realize the process. Um,
I agree with you. I think there is something there where you just going back just a little bit. You said about we're not on the same page. I'm going to say
Mhm.
we because we've transitioned. I know that you've made changes to diets with your cats and things. So we get to a point where there was almost like this resistance, and this
Mhm.
frustration, and just from the point of the perspective, it's like, well, goodness sake, well, I'm doing this to give you better food. Like, why aren't you
Mhm.
eating it? And
Yeah.
which I don't want to come on to our third P yet, but I do find it fascinating what you said there about the miscommunication, and actually that is something that I think gets missed.
Mhm.
People focus on why isn't my cat doing essentially what I want it to do without
Yeah.
looking at why is your cat behaving the way it's behaving.
Yeah.
There's a difference there. The cat not
Mhm.
doing what you want is from a control perspective and actually from a
Mhm.
human led perspective. Whereas if
Mhm.
you look at why is my cat behaving this way, why is my cat not eating, or why is my cat only doing this or this with the food,
Mhm.
you're coming from the cat's perspective, which you and I have cat-centered businesses, so that's what we're trying to support people with, right? So when you look at the perspective for the cat, you've got to switch your perspective to look at it from the
Mhm.
perspective of the cat. We've got our intention is to change our cat's food for better. Generally, we're changing from dry to wet to raw, or we're incorporating fresher elements, or whatever it may be. We're making changes, I would
Yeah.
say 90% of the time, for the better, better quality, better texture, whatever.
Mhm.
So we've got to try to see it from their perspective, haven't we?
Yeah.
And like you said, and that leads into when we've got to be patient.
Yeah. Yeah. Because because there is a process. We might even have a 4th P, for process, right? Because
Mm,
there is a
mm,
process for, um kind of basically teaching them,
mm,
this is food too, right?
mhm.
But we have to start with that perspective of, "I get you've never seen this before, you don't know what this is. I can't just set it down in front of you and expect you to eat it, so I have to engage in a process of teaching you that this is food to eat too."
Mhm.
And I think understanding what it kind of reminds me of, I don't know, how Jackson Galaxy talks about like a challenge line
Mhm.
with cats' behavior. You almost have to find your cat's challenge line with new food, because I really think of it like a number line, right? Like 0 to 100. And like 0 is they're eating their old food, and 100 is they're 100% of the time eating the new food. And there's 99 little steps in between there. And sometimes people think it's just like 2 steps. I put some food down and waited for them to eat it. It's like, nope, we skipped a whole bunch of steps there. But sometimes you have to figure out where your cat is at. And I think some cats, you are starting with, oh, they don't mind if I put a little bit of new food on the same plate as their old food. Other cats will be like, absolutely not. That needs to be like across the room from me before I'm going to eat again. And figuring out where your cat will continue to eat their old food, their current food, that's the line that you're starting with.
Mm,
And then slowly introducing more and more, either closer or closer, and more of the new food.
mm,
Because, and I guess this is another perspective piece, as humans, we often focus on how foods taste, right? Like,
mm,
try it, you might like it. And for a lot of, it's like, oh, that tasted good. That's the last thing for cats is taste. It's the last. They have very, very few taste buds compared
mm.
to humans, and even compared to dogs, which I find kind of bizarre, since like dogs eat poop and other nasty things, and yet somehow they have more taste buds than cats. But that's the way it is. But so like taste is really the very last. And so it's another piece of keeping perspective. Smell is key for cats.
Mhm.
So when if they don't like their new food anywhere near them, but it's in the same room, they are in fact interacting with it because they're smelling it.
Yeah.
They're smelling it, they're aware that it's there. And this is kind of what we talk about in the process of exposure and paired association. You're exposing your cat to the new food, it's there, and we don't have any expectation they're going to even put it near their mouth. It's just there. And so you're exposing it and you're pairing it with their current food that they feel good about. And so I'm smelling the new food while I'm eating my old food, and that is helping create a link really in your cat's mind of like, okay, that's okay to be here while I'm eating. And as you kind of slowly inch the new food closer and closer, and again, it slowly is really, really key. You are helping, you're teaching your cat, um, this is food, this is safe, this can be eaten too, just like your current food.
Agreed. And I think that the point what you said about, teaching them, when we're teaching, whether that's, humans or animals, there's an element of teaching where you understand the concept and grasp the concept because you grasp the concept because you understand it. And with understanding with cats, there's got to be a piece of safety, and
Yeah.
there's an emotional part to that.
Mhm.
We have to remember that they are sentient beings. So if you said to a child who's been eating, for example, I'm going to use the crappy metaphor of, dry food for cats and Haribo like sweets for kids versus,
Mhm.
raw food and broccoli. Um, if you're going to suddenly sort of take that away, or however you decide to transition, that's a huge leap.
Yes.
Now I know we do talk about, doing a transition slowly, considering textures, which we talked about with the previous live that we did. But we've still got to give our cats that emotional reassurance. There is an emotional part to change. They are what's the word, neophobic, most of them, in
Yes.
fact that they like routine. They thrive on routine because they feel safe, because they know what to expect, regardless of how aloof they may be or laid back or
Mhm.
chilled out. There is still an element where they like food at a certain time, or they will generally come to you for cuddles or play or whatever it may be. So when we look at pace, we need to look at the routine and how we're doing it, but also like, how does the fact that we have even made a decision to make changes to their diet, their source of survival, because food is for them, is a key source of survival, we're deciding to make changes to that,
Yeah.
and they've got no control over it. So
Yeah.
regardless of whether the cat's an indoor cat or an outdoor cat, if they're an indoor cat, they've got very limited control over their environment. Their sense of autonomy is smaller than, for example, outdoor cats. These are all things that we need to consider, that it's not just a question of like, oh, I've learned that I should be feeding them something different. It's okay, so where, like you said with this line, like, where are we starting? What type of what's my cat's predisposition for change? How do they normally react if we make changes in their home? Do they go and run and hide when we don't see them for a week, or are they in amongst the hustle and bustle and they're enjoying something different? So what is your cat's predisposition to change, I think, is something to look at. And then, like you said, we're trying to understand what's the best way for them as an individual. So like you and I have talked before about Leo and baby Max. Baby Max, if he has the same meal twice in a row, he's like, what on earth are you doing, Roman? Like, no, give me variety, give me new things. Right. Leo, my life, Leo is the most routine cat you'll ever meet. And if I change, the plate shape or size or whatever, he's like, alert, warning.
That's right. Something is not right.
yeah. And he's out the patio door. Like, he won't eat then for like hours, right? Yeah. So so understanding, and I say this across all of my content and social media, cats are unique. And I do think that's also something that we need to remember, that we can talk tonight, and we will come on to patience and how we actually do the transition. But that's a general set of guidelines. It's not the way, because if I tried to use a certain prescriptive method for both of my boys, it wouldn't work. So like when we have these conversations, it's about looking at what could work for my cat, what could be a good option for them. So you touched a little bit there about the plate being the other side of the room and a bit of food being on the plate. So just talk a little bit more, because I call those two different ways to introduce food. So let's talk about both of those separately. So let's talk about, if we were saying like Leo, how really rigid cat doesn't like change. Talk us through the steps of putting the food in the corner of another room or a corner of the room, and tell us how that would look.
Yeah, I think when you do, my daughter's cat is that way. He does not like change whatsoever. So introducing anything new to him is a process. So, and again, it's kind of figuring out where that process, where it is, right? So, and the key is your cat continuing to eat their food, that their regular food, because we don't want them to get to a point where they're like, I'm out of here, I'm not eating anything. Then we've pushed them way too far at that point. So, well, really the very first step before any of it would be not free feeding your cat anymore, right? It's pretty common, where people just kind of set a bowl of the dry kibbles and so that food is available all the time. That's actually the very, very first step, is to not free feed the food. Because if that food's available all the time, your cat has zero incentive to even think about accepting a new food. They're like, why would I bother with that? I have a bowl of what I like over here. So you'll really work against the whole process if you keep food out all the time. And quite honestly, cats don't need food out. They're not grazing animals like cows or goats or sheep and whatever. So they do much better. It's, as I should say, it's a more natural way to feed them, to feed set meals. So that's really the very first step in transition, is set meals of their current food. And so for that process, figure out what your schedule is, right, in terms of when you're going to feed them. And the meals don't have to be exactly so many hours apart. Like a lot of people will, for an adult cat, they'll do in the morning, and then they'll do after work, and then before bed. And it's not going to be an even set of hours, and that's really fine. Younger cats and kittens need more meals than that, and you can just add those in as you can. But the first thing you would do is just set down their regular food and leave it down for about 15-20 minutes, and then you pick it up, and no more food until the next mealtime. That will very likely mean that they will not eat as much as they normally would. They're going to be hungry. They might miss a meal, and they're going to be okay. Like, it's okay, because you actually want to use their natural sense of hunger to sort of help support the transition. So that's the very, very first step. And because you don't want to try to introduce something new while you're trying to do new set meals. That's two new things. Cats don't like that. So you want to do one new thing at a time, right? So set
And
meals.
even with that, that first step, even with that, like that's not something to do like in 24 hours, right? There may be
No,
some cats that you've actually got to take that at their pace. So it might be
yes.
that if you're going from free feeding a bowl of dry food down 24/7, the
Mhm.
next day you pick it up for an hour, right? So do you know what I mean? Like some cats,
Sure.
that you may still cause stress with that, so pick it up for an hour and then put it down, and you slowly increase that. So there is this real slow
Mhm.
transition. And
Yeah.
like you said, some cats you could pick it up and put it down, like they wouldn't
Yeah.
there wouldn't be an issue. But we, like you said before, we've got to be aware of the perspective and
Mhm.
the the emotions that come behind that. So just for anybody that, if that is your first step, switching to like removing free feeding, see how
Mhm.
your cat does with it.
Yeah.
That there may be some looking around for the bowl and stuff like that, and again, that's fine, because you want to bring that kind of curiosity back to them, like you said, their natural hunger.
Yeah.
Equally, if you've got a cat that it seems to be crawling up the walls and it seems very stressed and anxious, we don't want to be causing that. So have a think about what pace works for both of you,
Yeah.
in terms of reducing their exposure to their comfort zone almost.
Yeah, yeah. Another way to do that is, if maybe your end goal is to have 3 meals a day, but maybe when you're first starting, you might break that into like 5, so
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they're getting their meals just a little bit more often.
yeah,
Just that extra reassurance, your food is here, it's okay, you're not starving to death, I promise, sort of
yeah.
reassurance to them. And then over time, kind of slowly wean it down to, 3
Yeah,
meals, if it's an
yeah.
adult. That's
I mean,
another
the
way
thing is
to.
with the dry food as well, cats are addicted, right? So
Right.
it's like a drug addict. If they've got exposure to it 24/7 and they're topping up on their sugar high all throughout the day, if you
Yeah.
then pick that up and go to work for say 8 hours and then come home, that cat is going to be in a chronic state of stress, right? The
Yeah.
body, the physical reactions and everything in the body as well.
Yeah.
So like Jennifer said, think about if you've got the capacity to, maybe when you come home from work, picking it up and putting and reducing their exposure to it, because the body, the chemicals, the hormones and
Mhm.
everything going on with their sugar levels, that all needs time to adjust as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great tip about breaking it down from free feeding to even like 5 times a day. I think that's great.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like you said, it really is figuring out for the individual cat, what do they need? Because
Yeah.
we don't wanna we want there's a very narrow window of tolerance, right?
Yes.
This is new and it's gonna be okay, but I don't want you to get stressed, because when cats get stressed, that can just lead to all kinds of problems, that we don't want for anybody. Um,
Yes.
so
Yes.
yeah, but you're walking a little bit of a tightrope of.
It is a bit of a fine line, isn't it? Because also you want them to have some level of stress, because you're making a change that they've got to adapt to. So if you are, with our psychology background, so if you're adapting to any type of stress, you've
Mhm.
got to, your tolerance and your exposure to it has to be desensitized. So you've got
Yeah.
to kind of, and I know people that are watching are like, but you just said don't stress them out, and now you're saying that you've got, that they can have stress. Like Jennifer said, it is a really fine line. I think no one knows your cat better than so
Mhm.
if I saw that Leo was, because he does pacing, when he's shut in and it's nighttime, it takes it 5 to 10 minutes. He'll go from the cat flap to the back door, the cat flap to the back door for 5-10 minutes, and
Yeah.
then he settles, right? If he was doing that with food bowls, I'd give it a few minutes, and if he didn't settle, I would be putting it down if I was at
Mhm.
this stage. So
Yeah.
read your cat, everyone, and know
Yeah.
that you are making changes and you are helping them to adjust to that. That is the goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
When it comes to transitioning, making them okay with the changes that you're making.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, right, it's knowing your cat and it's
Yeah,
following their pace, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's really holding both, this tension between following your cat's pace, but also urging them forward, right? Like, and it's like these tiny little microscopic little adjustments we're making. I mean, it really does take a kind of a sensitive eye, right? Like where you're reading your
Yes.
cat and knowing them and, um, I don't know, kind of embarking on a journey with them that is going to that you both have a really important role to play. Um,
I agree, and it's about reading them, isn't it? So
yeah.
I've said to people before, if you're going to make changes to your cat's diet, so if you're transitioning them or making changes, so we're talking about going from dry to, you know, wet, whatever, but this also goes for like changing brands and things like that.
Mhm.
You know, transitioning can mean from format and type of food to flavors and brands and things. You know, you need to be prepared and you
Mhm.
need to be ready. You know, like you said about pace, you've got to understand that this isn't something that's unlikely to happen overnight, so you've got to make the commitment. You've got to be in it for the long haul. Like, you know, it took us like 5 months, maybe 6 months to get Leo. When we first got him from the rescue center, he'd been there for 3 months. He'd been on wet and dry. Before that, he was 18 months feral, you know. So then he came to us, and we gave him another 3 months on wet and dry because he was previously feral. He wasn't hugely domesticated.
Mm.
And I was like, now is not a good time to make changes. He's just adjusting to come and to live with us. And then
Right.
it took us, I think it was about 5 to 6 months to transition him.
Mhm.
In fact, I think it took us 5 months to get him from dry and wet to wet. I think I remember rightly. And again, we had probably about 3 or 4 months just on wet because I was desperate to get him onto raw. But actually, it was like he doesn't do very well with change. So
Yeah.
you know, reading your cat and making that commitment. I think it's a really good point you made there, Jennifer. It's not necessarily something to just when life is really busy and hectic and you find out that the cat should be on could be on a better type of food, that you're like, oh, let's make that change. You've got to be in it. I would say that commitment is key.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. It's like that phrase, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes with young kittens, it can happen really quickly because they're just more open, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, oh, I adopted this little kitten. You're home. Here's some new food, and they might be very fine with that. But certainly, not all kittens are, and adult cats are not. Like you know, even the most bold and confident cats typically need some time to
Yeah.
adjust to a new diet, just because, like you said, it's related to their survival. They're not going to take unnecessary chances when it comes to something that's about their survival.
No.
Um,
And also their body's got to adjust. Like we said about, you know,
yeah,
you know, sweets to like broccoli. If you give a cat one type of food one day and another the next, you know, they might
mhm,
have an upset tummy. Their gut biome, like
yeah,
you said to me, you know, we had a concept about Leo and baby Max, and we talked about, you know, different types of food, and I was worried that, you know, one of them would have an upset tummy. I won't go into too many details here, but you know, you said to me like the gut biome, you know, that needs to have good bacteria, that needs to adjust. And if we all think about what we eat, you know, we
mhm,
talk about things in moderation and things like that. And I know certainly if I have a bit of a binge on junk food, you know, I'm
mhm,
really bloated and really uncomfortable, you know. So again, it's thinking about giving the body physical
mhm,
body time, because if a cat has an upset tummy, so either they've got vomiting or diarrhea, they're
mhm.
going to have an aversion to food again anyway. So you don't
Yes.
want to be causing that, right?
Right. Yo, for sure. Yeah, because if they have something new and then they get sick on it, they're very
In
likely to
trouble.
be like, "Oh, well, that food was bad, so now I'm not going to eat that."
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
evidence in their little minds of something wasn't right about that food, not realizing, "Oh, they just had too much of it too soon." Um,
Exactly. But then it's like cause and effect, right? I smelt
yeah.
that, I ate that, this happened. I'm not going anywhere near that. Like alert,
I
alert.
know, right? And it's a legitimate alert, right? Like that makes sense from the cat's perspective. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And then we might be really frustrated, like, why? No, no, this is good. Please eat it. But um, so I feel like I would need to circle back to your question though, right? Because I think I took us on a tangent about set meals, right? That
Okay.
kind of being the
Yeah.
first thing. Um, but then thinking just a little bit more about exposure and paired association and that process and what that looks like. So
Mm,
again, I think it's figuring out where your cat needs you to start, right?
hmm.
So, um, it might be that you're kind of opening up that tin of wet food. Let's just say it's dry to wet, because that can really be one of the hardest
Yeah.
transitions because the food
Yes.
is so different.
Yes.
Um, so if your cat is like, okay, they're on set meals, time to eat. I've put the food down and then I'm going to open up that wet food too. You might be able to have it on a separate dish right next to their dry food, and they might continue to eat their dry food. And that would be what a wonderful place to start, right? That's
Yes.
a great place to start. And you would sort of slowly push those dishes together and then ever so slowly start putting the wet food on the same plate as the dry food. And then slowly taking a little bit of the dry away, adding more wet. And it's this little back and forth process till they're eating 100% wet. And that can take 3 days, 5 days, a week, or 3 months. I mean, it really that is gonna be so cat dependent, and you can try different, like, toppers and foods, and oftentimes it really helps to, grind up some dry kibble into, like, a powder, and then you can sprinkle it on the wet food, and then it sort of initially smells and tastes like what they're used to, and they're like, "Oh, this must
Mhm.
be okay," and next thing
Mhm.
they know, they're eating the wet food.
Mhm.
Um, that would be like an easy, right, kind of transition if that's where they were starting. And some cats, if you put down a dish of new food next to their current food, they'll be like, no, like I'm not eating. And so then you're moving the new food away. I don't know, however many, centimeters at a time, really, right? Until you're figuring out at what point will they start eating their food? How far away does the wet food need to be? And now
Yeah.
you have found their starting point, and it might be across the room or up on the counter, and that's okay. I mean, I think that's the part that we have to like unhook ourselves from, that there's
Yes.
some perfect place to start and some perfect amount of time. It's like there's no judgment here. It just is what it is. This is where
Mm,
your cat is starting, and
mm,
just accept the starting point, because if you resist the starting point, you are in for a tough road with your cat that will ultimately negatively impact your relationship with them.
mm.
And so understand this is the starting point. There doesn't have to be any judgment about where it is, and accept it, and then move forward ever so slowly from that point. And so this is the starting point. Maybe the next day I can move it a centimeter closer. Awesome. And they continue to eat. And you just sort of slowly do that. And eventually you'll get there. Like there's no rush. Like we put those constraints on ourselves, and we add all this pressure to the equation of, oh my gosh, they won't eat it and they need to eat it. And it's honorable because we're excited. We want them to eat the new food, right? It's really because we love them, but we cannot rush that process for them. It just makes it that much harder, and you can get frustrated, and yeah, you want to work with them, and not
Yeah.
against them.
Yeah. And what happens when you're frustrated, right? I mean, I think it was Dee Dee mentioned it. Yeah, that she
Yeah.
she feels the cat parents are key, and then the attitude to stay calm, try to give positive energies and let them go at their pace. That is key. So, I talk all about energy and emotions, and I think you've just, like, so we should have another P there, but I'm not quite sure what it should be. Positivity, maybe, I don't know, but
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is a piece there around our energy and our emotions, our emotions, our expectations, our judgments. I didn't realize when we were doing it with Leo, although I had done it with Pickle, but how much the little wins mattered. How
Mhm.
much, like you just
Mhm.
said, even if you've opened the sachet of wet food and they are still eating the dry, like that is a
That's a
win.
win.
For me, a win, and I am actually still having this now, and we've talked about Leo with occasionally not eating and then having dry food come in, which just goes against everything that I like believe, that I want, that I feel. And that in itself, like I got issues. I got to look at that, because like the goal is for him to eat.
Mhm.
The goal is for that, even when we're in the middle of transition, the goal is for them to eat.
Mhm.
Like you said right at the beginning, cats have the capacity to wait us out, and it becomes unhealthy and actually damaging to their health, right? So the
Yeah,
goal is for them to eat.
yeah.
And if they are eating when you've opened the sachet, that's a win. If they're
That's
eating
a
when it's
win.
plate by plate, side by side, sorry, that's a win. You
Yeah,
know, I only ever view the win as, for example,
they
like
ate
baby
it.
Max, oh, he's eating a plate of raw food. That's the
Yeah.
win. And that's not actually the case. Like that's the end goal, right?
Right, right.
But and they're different, because
Yeah.
going back to what we've both said, like it's a journey. And when you're on a journey, you look at the milestones.
Mhm.
You ran the first mile, then you do the second, you're in it for the marathon, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
what is it that's happening along the way, and what is our reaction to that, I think is important. So
Yeah.
if we've got like I know some people have reached out to me before because they've been feeding raw food, for example, or a high quality wet, and then the cat won't eat. So they've had to kind of go back a stage. And I know you and I have talked about this, that sometimes that happens, and life is not linear. You know, life isn't like you tick that box,
Right.
you've got them eating raw food, or you've got them eating wet food, or they're off the dry, like you're done. That's not the way it goes. You know, you may have times when you circle back, and again, not every cat will do this. Some cats will be on their food and be more than happy. But I know, for example, with Leo, you know, we've had challenges, particularly the last few months, with inconsistencies with his eating. And if I look at the bigger picture, a lot of changes in the house. You know, we've had a lot of different, you know, circumstances going on, and one of my, I don't want to say failings, but one of my mistakes, which you so beautifully helped me to see, is that I was treating my cats the same. You know, I thought you've got to have a variety of proteins, you know, so I was bringing that to both the boys. Baby Max absolutely loved it. Leo was like, what the hell are you doing to me, woman? Like, eat this? Are you joking? You know, and he's not eating. No wonder. So even the most experienced of people and people that know what think they know what they're doing, like, you know, we sometimes get it wrong. So if you feel like you're taking a step and you're not making progress, take a step back, you know, take 2 steps back. If you push that plate a little too far and it's too close to them and they won't eat it, take a step back. You know, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, sometimes you've got to look at, just like you said, Jennifer, where you are, you know, where you are right now. And then for me, I think there is a piece about how do we feel about that? Because if we're feeling angry and frustrated, I'm the one that's got to do extra work there. I've got to look at, where is that coming from? You know, why am I bringing that energy to things? Because there's going to be no chance of Leo eating his plate, which, like Dee Dee said, if I'm putting a plate down and I'm like, you've got to eat. Is he eating? He's got to eat. He hasn't eaten all morning. Oh my God, what's going on? Like, Leo's going to be like, what the hell, woman? No. You've just given me poison. Like,
right. Yeah, no, it's true. Well, and it's I love the point you made about, like, it's not linear, right? And sometimes we might get overly excited and push the new food too close. Okay, just pull it back a few centimeters and then see. Okay, yes, they're eating. Okay, great. No, they're not. Pull it back a few more. Right? Like, it's really, it is a process. And I also think, you know, to your point about the little wins along the way, they're very hard, I think, for us to hold in mind because we are so focused on the end goal. And this is where I think keeping a little journal can be really helpful for this process, because then you actually can see, because you might be feeling, oh my gosh, she's still not eating this wet food. Like, I'm a failure. My cat's a failure. I can't do this. I'm going to throw in the towel. Well, if you were tracking your journal, you could see, like, oh, it started over there and now he'll actually eat it with it next to him, even though he hasn't touched the new food yet, but you can see the wins. And I think that can kind of help sustain us through the journey when we see the wins of, like, okay, I'm like doing this right. I'm seeing some progress. Okay, I can keep doing this. It's, you know, and I think writing it down helps, because in the emotional state that we're thinking about it, we get really focused on the end goal, and we really often forget the little wins in between.
And we get lost, right? We get lost in the emotion of either frustration because it's not going how we think it should, or how we want it to. So, like, there's shoulds there, you know, how we think it should, or we get, you know, annoyed, or like you said, we feel like a failure ourselves, which has a whole lot for all of us, you know, our own issues and things. And actually, like you said, we are just where we are, you know. The cat is doing what it needs to do to feel safe, to be able to survive. Just take it at that value and look at where you were a week ago, you know. And also, I think there is something to be said about, this is just a moment in time. I'm practicing this more and more for myself. You know, when I look at, like, Leo, you know, 3 weeks ago, his asthma was so bad that we had to have steroid tablets alongside the steroid inhaler. And I was a complete state, because I'm like, oh my God, I don't want him on this much medication. You know, I feel really bad as a cat mum. There's got to be more I could do. And I actually kind of composed myself and thought, this is just a moment in time. A month ago, he was having no inhalers, right? So I think when it comes to food, look at where you are today, but also look at where you've come. Look at what's happened before. Look at where you've been. So even if it is just a question of you're trying to do the 2 plates, you're bringing them closer, they're side by side, or you are doing, mixing the two. Look at where you were before when you just thought that free feeding dry feed was the best way, right? Even understanding like our evolution of knowledge and understanding sometimes is also, like that's part of the journey. So I can beat myself up because I free fed pickled dry food for years, but at the time that's what I thought that we did,
Sure, of course.
And when we look at where we are today, I do believe there is a space to find gratitude, a space to find like those wins. Like he ate today, like it wasn't 3 plates like he normally would. Talking about Leo, but he had 3 mouthfuls, right? That is something in him. So look at when we talk peeps about, pace and perspective. The other P that we're talking about now is, is patience, and it's not just with the cat and how we think that this should go, is with ourselves, and I say that because I'm like, I got a tattoo on my neck of patience because I don't have any.
I am not known for my patience either.
That makes you feel better.
But yeah, no, that is not my strong suit. It's really hard.
It is hard.
It's a practice, right? Like
oh yes,
it's definitely not a destination I've ever arrived at, but it's a practice that I was like constantly sort of like having to challenge myself of be patient, be patient, be patient.
Yeah. And again, I think that's the spiritual side with cats, right? They can be our teachers if we let them. There was a time a couple of years ago, Leo didn't eat, and we ended up taking him to the vets. He was in there for 4 nights. He wouldn't eat anything. And I was like, I was in an absolute mess. And I thought, I went to surrender it. I was like, do you know what? There's nothing I can do. Like literally, there's nothing I can do. He's in the vets. I can't touch him. I can't get near him.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm done not worrying or caring, but I'm done stressing. I'm done trying to fix it and find a way. So I was like, right, I'm going to shift myself, my energy. So I started to think Leo's eating a plate of food. I started to feel Leo's got a full tummy. I was like, right, what can I do? What can I do in this situation? So if you've got a cat that you're trying to transition and you're getting stuck, or you've reached a kind of a plateau with either a step forward or a step back, I would really encourage you guys to look at your energy. What are you bringing to the situation? Because when I had that moment on that Saturday, I never forget it. I was like, do you know what? I'm done stressing about it. I'm going to see him with a full tummy, feel him that he's hungry. Within the hour, I got a call from the vet. Like, it sounds like it was like a miracle, like angel moment. It was the most bizarrest thing. And they phoned me and said, he's just eaten. And I was like, fascinating, and I'm like, the psychologist in me is like, well, that's just coincidence. Yet the other part of me is like, there is no such thing as coincidence,
right?
So if you reach that impasse with your cats and you don't feel like you're making progress, look at how you're feeling. I would recommend. What would your thoughts be if somebody kind of reaches that plateau space?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it is about I think we can get so laser focused, right, on what's happening. And so I think if we've been moving along and now we've hit a plateau, I think stepping back a little bit and saying, okay, hold on. And like you said, gathering ourselves, kind of grounding ourselves, look at what's happening, because there's something being communicated there, right, by your cat's behavior. Like something was working along and now something has changed. Okay, so what might that be, right? Are they bored? Did you change the plate? Did you change the dish soap you used to wash the plate? Did something else happen in their environment that has thrown them off? Or, there could be a myriad of things, but I think it's kind of stepping back and gathering ourselves and kind of just taking a look and almost trying to detach, right, from I have to make something happen to let me just take and let me just observe, what's happening here, and see if you can kind of find some clues as to what might need to change. Because it could be anything really, right, for any particular cat or situation or person.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been live for like 45 minutes. Does anybody have any questions about transition that we can answer? Is there anything else that we can support you guys with? So we've talked about perspective, you know, coming at it from the cat's perspective, understanding what it means for them emotionally, behaviorally, you know, for you to be making changes to their food. We've talked about patience, how Jennifer and I don't have very much, and how it is really key when you're working with cats, and pace, which is very specific to each cat, you know, understanding where they are. Yeah. We also talked a bit about energy and, you know, reading your cat and kind of the acceptance of where you are, wherever that may be. Does anybody have any questions for us about transitioning? I see that Heather says, I was very lucky. Bailey absolutely loves raw and took straight to it from the first plate was put down at 16 and a half years old.
Wow.
Wow. He honestly couldn't get enough. I talk him through everything new I introduce and tell him how much it will help him. Brilliant. Always in a happy, upbeat voice, removing any stress out of it. He's the best cat and will accept any supplements, etc. he needs added straight to his food. Now, almost 19, he's a superstar and absolutely blowing my mind. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Massive like stars and beautiful love to Bailey. That is phenomenal. Wow. Absolutely phenomenal. Lorraine says, everything you're saying is so true. I've transitioned my girls from kibble to canned to human grade, lightly cooked. Amazing. Well done. Well done, Lorraine. That is brilliant.
It can often seem, right, that first transition from dry to anything other, right, to anything moisture, like that really tends to be the hardest transition, right, because dry is so addictive, and because the texture, the feel of it, the consistency of it, the smell of it, it's everything, all the things are so different. And often it can be like, once you get over that really, really big hurdle of dry to wet, oftentimes then shifting from wet to lightly cooked, like Lorraine is feeding, or raw, those tend to not be quite as, that don't quite need as much of the marathon amount of time, because the texture and things are not as drastically different. But that first hurdle off a dry, that's the tough one. It really is.
It is. Yeah. And I do think there is, you know, like we've said, that not only is it ultra processed, you know, you've got chemicals involved with that, right? It's not just about the processing or the quality of the food, which is what we talk about from wet to raw. You know, we're looking at chemicals that are impacting the cat's body, that, you know, they are addicts to that. You know, I'm going to get it wrong, the serotonin or the dopamine. I always get those two confused.
One of those.
Always. the happy hormone that they get from the chemical induced high from dry food, that's not just a behavior or a pattern, that's a chemical addiction that we're trying to break, you know, and to stop them kind of experiencing. So it is one of the toughest. And
it's hard.
And I would also say, speaking from experience, that there can be judgment that we bring to our cats and what they eat when there is dry food involved, because like I've had Leo on raw for months and months and months and months and months, you know, brilliantly, nutriment performed, whichever way around it went. And then we had dry food in the house because baby Max came along. You know, he was brought to us on wet and dry, so we replicated what he had from the rescue center. I didn't realize, which I did straight away after the first time I think we did a live, I could put the raw and I could put the dry in the freezer, which is we did straight away. I was like, fascinating. So it's been in the freezer ever since, but it was in the house, you know. And so that we've had times now where, not recently but previously, and literally, like, I mean, a couple of months ago, Leo, we were having a standoff, you know, and he wouldn't eat, and I'm putting food down, and we get to the place where dry was the only thing he'd eat, you know. And the judgment and the pressure and the dense emotions that I was feeling around that, like, he shouldn't be eating that, it's bad for him, it's bad for his asthma, it's bad for his teeth, it's bad for his body, you know. And yet all he would even approach or entertain was dry food. There needs to be a space at times when, like, we are both pro raw, we are both, you know, pro good, we are both pro species appropriate, right? And dry food is not species appropriate. But I say to people that are struggling, that have struggled, that are still struggling with dry food, like, it can be a thorn sometimes, in the journey of cat food. And if you have moments or days or meals where that's the only thing your cat will eat, I don't say this lightly, I speak from experience. They have to eat. That is the end goal. We do want them to be on a species appropriate diet. However, you can't wait it out. You need to get something in them.
Yeah, you can't force it, right? We want the healthier diet for them, right? We, like you said, we want this species appropriate, but we also can't force them. But we have to work with them to help them learn to accept it, right? And when they do, it's the best feeling in the world, right? When your cat finally eats the new food you've been working so hard and long and patiently for, you're going to feel like you've won the lottery, right? Like, yes, like this is the best.
Yeah.
But you have to respect their pace along the way, and you'll get there when you get there. Slow and steady, right? Another one of those lovely little cliches, like slow and steady wins the race, and that really is true.
Yeah.
It helps to be consistent in the process. If like, oh, today I'm having a good day, myself as the person, and I can do this, yay, and I'm doing it, but maybe the next day I'm having a rotten day and I don't have the patience, I'm just gonna put something down and leave it all day long. That can be so confusing for your cat, and that will just make everything take longer. So I think you had said earlier today, like, know where you are, like in your season of life, like what's happening in your world, and right, kind of figuring out, am I in a place where I can sort of consistently engage in this process with my cat and do this? Because that will really help it be more successful. And not that everything has to be perfect in your world, but you do need to have a certain amount of bandwidth for the process, because it can challenge us, and all the emotions it brings up for us. Yeah.
I think there's got to be some level of commitment, like you said it, and understanding if you're not there right now, that's fine. Like, gather more information, do more research, watch more lives, find more information. Do you know what I mean? That is still taking a step in transitioning, right? Because you're looking at what brand you can afford or what flavors you're going to get, or there's still stuff that you can be doing if you feel you've got capacity. If you don't feel ready to take the step and to make changes to the food, look at other things that you can do. You and I talked before about different types of raw. If you can't, and I'm not trying to give people like a get out of jail free card, because obviously we want people to transition, but if you don't have the mental capacity yourself, it's going to be worse for both of you if you try it. And like you said, you have those kind of real ups and real downs and the bit in between, and that's not a good way to approach it. So have a think about bringing in some of the freeze-dried treats. Have a think about, Jennifer and I talked about before, having those bits that you can have fun with. You can give them the bits where you flick it across the floor and you play with it. And there are ways to bring in other elements in terms of the changing their diet that isn't necessarily their primary food option. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, if you're not in a place to start like the whole process of it, right? Like, start with working on set meals, start with introducing, like you said, healthier treat options, and start with the research, because there can be a lot of that piece, right? You just don't go from one day I fed this and the next day I did this, even for ourselves, right? Like, what pet stores are around? What options do they have for me? Do I need to look at the plate or the dish that I'm feeding my cat on? Because sometimes that can have a really big impact on how your cat receives the food. If it's too deep, then it can bother their whiskers. If it's plastic, it might have a weird smell. If you changed what dish soap you used, now the dish smells a little different. Like, all those things can impact it too. And so starting to think about those things, right? Like you said, I love that phrase. That feels like a very UK phrase. Have a think about. I really like that. So have a think about all of those little things that might feel like, oh, I'm in a space to do those, even though I'm not ready to do the whole process yet. And it's kind of like your prep work in a way, I guess, is how you could think about, like, what's all the prep work I can do until I'm in a place where I'm ready to like do this consistent, committed process.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. And like the research bit beforehand, sometimes that's the bit where actually you can kind of get your ducks in a row. Like look at us
Mhm.
putting out all the little sayings tonight.
Yes, yes.
You can check you've got the bowls and the plates or whatever it may be. And on that point, when you're looking at doing research, tell everybody what the Facebook group is that you're an admin for, because I think it's a beautiful space to go for people to start getting support. If they're in the UK, in fact, wherever they are, because my community, the Naturally Cats community, is everywhere. But you guys you're not, goodness sake, you're not country specific. So
No, it's
talk a little bit
international.
about the
Yeah.
Facebook group, and people were looking to transition. That was their first step to gather information. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, because I think, right, finding the kind of support you need for the transition is that other piece, right? To sort of help with manage our own emotions. Like, what do we need? What kind of support do we need to run this marathon with our cat? So Facebook group, the group that I help admin, that I think is, the best one on Facebook, of course, it's called Feline Nutrition: Feed Cats Like Cats. And it's not raw specific, but its goal is to sort of help feed species appropriate. So canned or cooked or raw. And there's a lot of support there for that transition process. And you can, hear from other cat moms and dads about what worked for them. And, you can feel like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one doing that. I offer one-on-one consultations to help with transitions. If one-on-one feels better than a Facebook group. And so I think there's all different kinds of options to figure out what works for you. Whether you like a group process, whether you like a one-on-one process, whether you like to just read information or watch lives and other videos. There's a ton of information out there. So I think it's figuring out what works best for you, right? How do you like to take in information, and what feels helpful and supportive? Oops, I think you're muted, Julianne. I can't hear you.
That's because I was typing. I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying. So I muted myself. Thank you. I put the link to the Facebook group there, and also to say to people,
perfect.
if you contact Jen and you give her the code Naturally Cat, you actually get a 5% discount off her nutrition services, because you've come via this community. So I'm just trying to find your website so I can post a link for that as well. So like Jennifer said, sorry, I called you Jen then. That was a slip of the tongue.
Jen is fine.
There we go. Well-fed feline. So as Jennifer said, if you want the group support, the Facebook group is awesome. If you want one-to-one, Jennifer does. Is that right? Wellfedfeline.com. Is that the right one?
There's an S, and I don't know if that makes a difference. You have an HTTPS. I don't know if that makes a difference or not.
Yes, that is just copied from your site.
Okay.
Hang on a second. Let me just check this is you.
Yep, that's me.
That one?
Yep, there's Hazel.
Is that Hazel?
Oh, yes, of course. She's everywhere. Yes.
Oh, my goodness. So Jennifer's got a blog, in case you didn't know, everybody.
Yeah.
And I think up here, yeah, services. Okay. So if you need help and support, go there, Well-Fed Feline. Comment or contact her with, did we say Naturally Cats 5? I can't remember.
I think just Naturally Cats. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the services that you offer. So I've recently had the absolute pleasure of enjoying one of your services for my boys. Oh my God, it rocked my world. Tell everybody about the services that you offer so that they know how you can support them, my love.
Sure. I have a couple different sort of consultation services. So I have a general one. If you just want to kind of talk for an hour about, here's what I'm feeding. Can I think it through with you, and kind of brainstorm. And if there are questions you have, or if it's part of your research process, like I'm thinking about raw and I'm not quite sure, and here's my list of questions. Really the general consultation can be about anything related to feline nutrition that we want to talk about. And then I do have a consultation that's specific to the transition, because that can be a bit more extensive. And so after we meet, we'll kind of come up with a plan that's specific for your individual cat. And then you'll get a month of email support to kind of help you through that process. And then there are a couple other ones too, related if you want to learn to feed prey model, or, introduce some other things. And let's see, I also just added a homemade diet analysis, where if you wanted me to take a look and kind of just make sure everything's filled in and taken care of. And eventually one of these days, I'm going to be offering some small groups. So I'm still working on that, and I'm hoping to roll that out later this summer. So, or maybe fall. I have to see how long it takes me, but I'm working on it.
Super exciting. That is super exciting. I am so glad that we've connected. I think the work that you're doing for cats is phenomenal, Jennifer. And to know that, you not only qualified in this area, but you've been doing it with your own cats. I think, for me personally, like, I will go to people that I know is tried and tested, so like knowing how you support Hazel, and you've got other cats as well, with their diets. It's just brilliant. And like I said to you before, I do think at some point you may not have your day job, because you'll just be doing raw fed feline like all the time.
Well, I hope so. I'll get there.
So if anybody needs support, you can either find Jennifer in the Facebook group or via her website. Get in touch and mention Naturally Cats, and you'll get 5% off. Any other questions from anybody before we wrap up? I realize we're just over time, so we do need to come to a close. But we are here. We are live every month now. We've decided to commit to come and be live together every month. And we do, I think it's the third Wednesday. Fourth Wednesday.
Yep.
Fourth Wednesday every month. So we are live again on the 26th of July. At 7 p.m. So if anybody's got any specific topics about raw food or about food in general that you'd like us to cover, please let us know. Jennifer and I, we kind of, we come up with the topics ourselves from what we've experienced, or what if the Facebook group's particularly active about a certain topic. But we want to help you guys. So if there's anything that you need support with, or that you've got questions about, then drop it in the comments here, tag one or both of us, and we will cover it in the coming months. So, we'll be live every month. We will think of a catchier name for this session.
We need a good name. We'll have to think of a name.
We do. And if anybody's got any suggestions, feel free to put it in the comments, because that we'd be welcome. That would be welcome.
That would be great.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up for this evening? What's your parting thought about transitioning your cat?
I love the P's we came up with, right? Like, just holding these P's in mind: perspective, and perspective, patience, pace, positivity. Was there another one? Peace of mind. I like, that's nice too. So hold those P's in mind, I think. And that's a good place to be.
Beautiful. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I like to add to that, all of the P's, and be kind, be kind to yourself. I say this a lot. Be kind to yourself when you're doing this, whether you're doing the research stage, the treat stage, the actual journey, like whatever is going on, just be kind to yourself. Wherever you are right now, that's where you are. And the shoulds about where you think you should be, you got to let them go, peeps, because they will just tear your mind apart. So, take it easy, one step at a time, be kind to yourself, bring that energy to your cat, and just take it steady.
Yeah.
So enjoy your day, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here with us, and we will see you all again next month. Bye for now.